Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and I'm sorry we don't have seating for everyone. This is an unusual occurrence for us. I will now call this council meeting to order on July 12th, 2023 at 5 p.m. And I will start with the land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. Next is approval of the agenda. And first, I'll ask if there are any additions to the agenda this evening. Seeing none, the recommendation is that the order of business be amended to consider item 8, delegation/public question period, in advance of item 7, public hearings, and that the addendum to the agenda to include the revised CAO job description as directed at the special council meeting on July 10th be approved, and that the agenda be approved as amended. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Councillor Day. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, you may declare at any time throughout the meeting if one does arise. Minutes of previous meetings. The recommendation is that the minutes of the special council meetings held on June 21st, 2023 and July 5th, 2023 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Winters, is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next is recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held May 15th, 2023 be adopted as amended. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn, is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? Moving on, the next recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on June 21st, 2023 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle, is there any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Coburn.
Thank you. I think there is an error in 8.2.2 in the minutes of that meeting, and I thought I would just bring it to everyone's attention, mostly to prove that I actually do read the minutes. But it does state that Rachel Patterson, who attended council and on behalf of Grey Bruce Pride, it says that Grey Bruce Pride currently uses the Kilsyth Arena for their roller derby team. I don't believe that's correct. I think she was just speaking on behalf of those folks who use that facility for roller derby and offering her support. And I would turn to Councillor Day. You may know through you, Mayor Carlton, if that's correct or not.
Go ahead.
That is correct. Thank you for finding that mistake.
Okay, so we will change the recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on June 21st, 2023 be adopted as amended. So a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Under announcements, are there any announcements that any member wishes to make? Seeing none. With mayor updates, I will say that I heard back from Community Schools Alliance, and they had 5 positions open, only 4 people ran, so I am acclaimed as a member on that one. So I will bring further information back moving forward. Delegations or public question period. For items on the agenda, any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda shall So make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. To register, go to www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 603. We do not have any items there, so moving on to items not on the agenda. Any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item not on the agenda may make written application to the clerk by the Thursday preceding the meeting they wish to speak at. To register, the same information as above. So 7.2.1 is the Integrity Commissioner's Periodic Report, Janice Atwood of Principles Integrity. The recommendation here is that the Integrity Commissioner's Periodic Report covering the period of May 1st, 2021 to May 31st, 2023 be received for information. May I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Day. Janice, welcome this evening, and I will turn it over to you to present your report.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Council, for making a little bit of time for me this evening. It looks like you likely have a very busy evening ahead of you. So I will just make some brief comments, really as much for the public's benefit as for your edification. We are your Integrity Commissioner, and this report, we call it a periodic report. It really covers a period of about 2 years, and the election hiatus falls in the middle of it. So hence, it's a bit longer than an annual report. An Integrity Commissioner is an accountability officer that really assists council in understanding their ethical responsibilities and provides a mechanism for the public to reach out if they have concerns. So there's really three general areas that our work falls into. And one of those is really education and training. And you'll recall that we provided education and training to all of the elected officials in the county on December 1st of 2022, following the most recent elections. And my partner, Jeff Abrams, provided that training. And so that is something that assists new members of council and assists existing members of council to reacquaint themselves with the expectations of the Code of Conduct and the rules around conflicts of interest. We also are available for members of council and members of local boards in order to provide confidential advice on matters that may fall into gray areas where a member may think that they ought to recognize a conflict of interest, or if there's other issues that arise from time to time. Members of council and members of local boards can reach out to their Integrity Commissioner and obtain confidential written advice that they can then rely on in the event somebody raises a concern in the future. And so that provides a huge advantage to members of council and local boards over the olden days when members had to sort of look to their own resources in order to find reliable, confidential advice. We also provide, and this is really the feature that I think often the public thinks is the most important feature of an Integrity Commissioner, which we think it is not. We think it's a residual obligation of the Integrity Commissioner, and that is we are the enforcement mechanism. We are the mechanism through which a person can bring a complaint and have us take a look at that complaint and determine whether there is anything that requires review, investigation, or in some cases, some kind of course correction or sanction. So we always, when we look at complaints that we receive, really look at whether, first of all, we triage it. Is it within our jurisdiction? Is it something that is in the public interest to pursue? Is it a mere trifling that can just be resolved informally? Or is it something that really requires an investigation and a public report to council? And if that's the case, we ensure that we apply the tenets of procedural fairness so that any member about whom we're investigating would be fully aware of the complaint, of the subject, and of the details so that they can make a full explanation to us of what's going on and perhaps correct misunderstandings, etc. So procedural fairness is a very big component of our investigations. And at the end of the day, if we need to bring a report, we're always looking to what really serves the public interest. Is there an ability to achieve some course correction, to get a better outcome rather than simply the hammer over the head or the slap on the wrist or what have you? Our ability to sanction is one thing, but the ability to try to provide some helpful guidance to course correction is really our ultimate goal when we're looking at these matters. So your report points out that we have, in the course of the almost 2 years or 2 years covered by this report, we have responded to 7 requests for advice, and we have provided those. And we have received 3 complaints. And when we are able to resolve a complaint without concluding a formal investigation and providing a written report, we simply provide a written disposition back to the complainant and the respondent member so that everybody on both sides of that complaint understands how the matter has been resolved and why in a certain way without a full public report. But in regard to complaints received, only 1 complaint resulted in a public report, and that was in March of 2022. So as I say, we lean, Jeff and I at Principles Integrity, we lean heavily into education and guidance and advice and course correction. So those really are our pillars that we look to. One of the advantages, because we serve approximately 50 municipalities across Ontario, one of the advantages we have from our vantage point is that we can see commonality of issues around the province, and we're able to bring some of that back to our clients. And so we share some of that in this report and some of the takeaways. So you'll see in the latter 3 pages of the report, we talk about what are some of the issues that we see as themes around the province over the last couple of years. And certainly one of those that we've observed is advertent or inadvertent leaks of confidential or closed information out of council. So we point out that maintaining confidentiality around closed session documents and information is a cardinal rule for members of council. And we think that that's an important one to reiterate, that has come to the fore in a number of areas around the province where it's been problematic. So not to suggest it's a problem for you, it's simply bringing to you some of the things we've seen in themes around the province. So that is one of them. Of course, if there are, one of the downsides or disadvantages of a leaky council, if I can call it that, is that staff start to become reluctant to share legal advice and confidential information with council. So it really is a problematic behavior, and so we absolutely remind council that it's always important to maintain the confidentiality and the obligations of closed meeting. Another area that we've seen quite frequently around the province is harassment or disrespect, whether it arises sometimes because people are disagreeing about issues and then they become disagreeable and it devolves into disrespect. So we always remind councils that although it's important to be able to disagree, obviously in the democratic process, that's a fundamental pillar, but avoiding disparaging, disrespectful conduct is always really key. And whether it's sort of outright name calling or just incivility and microaggressions, it can really bring the tenor at council down and not be helpful to the public's perception of council's well-functioning. So ultimately, if left unchecked, it can result in harassment complaints. We note that the Bill 5, which was intended to provide the ability to remove to have an Integrity Commissioner's report result in an application to court, which would remove councillors who were found to be harassing from their seat. We actually did not support that legislation, and that legislation actually did not pass second reading. And we actually think that the solutions do not require that kind of legislation. I think those who've seen how slowly the wheels of justice may turn on such issues will recognize that an application to court plus appeals might take well beyond 2 or 3 years to result in a conclusion. So we think probably there are better solutions that might lie in minor amendments to the Municipal Act, where which we've recommended to the province on the consultations, where, for example, a recommendation of the Integrity Commissioner might be not only a suspension of pay for 90 days, which is the ultimate sanction that we are in a position to recommend, but might also include, for example, suspension from position for up to 90 days. And it's a very small tweak. It exists in the Education Act today, that public school boards can remove a member for a short period of time from meetings. And so those kinds of minor tweaks are probably much more able to get the results that councils might need. And we're talking about the most egregious situations, the kinds of things that might come up once or twice in all of Ontario in the course of 3 or 4 years. So those are just comments that we make in passing with regard to egregious harassment. One of the key areas that we continually hear from members on throughout the province have to do with recognizing and avoiding conflicts of interest. And absolutely, that's a key area that can be a little bit nuanced. It's important for members to obtain their advice when they need that. For the sake of an hour of our time, it may save a whole lot of headache and complaints down the road. So certainly members are encouraged to, when they have those gray areas, seek some advice in order to not navigate confidently through those areas. And in that regard, we always look to a pragmatic, compliant solution. So we're not looking to always remove people from any opportunity to participate. In fact, it's our view that members of council were elected to come in and do a job, and they should be able to do that job to the best of their ability. And there's no, it's not wrong to have a conflict of interest. It's wrong to fail to recognize your conflict of interest. It's perfectly all right to say, on this particular matter, I have an interest, I'm going to declare it and step away, and then continue to participate in the balance of the matters. That's perfectly appropriate, and the public expects that. And so we really support that approach. Subject to any questions from members of council, those are really my comments on this report. And we think generally this report reflects, we would say, a good housekeeping stamp of approval. We don't see a lot of problems from our lens, which is a limited lens, but from our lens on the ethical side, it seems that council understands its obligations, and everything seems to be working very well from our perspective.
Excellent. Thank you, Janice. I will turn to council. Are there any questions at this point? Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Carleton, to Janice, thanks for the presentation. Some good reminders. What I would hope for in a summary report would be more specific details, if possible, around the kinds of information folks are seeking. I know that 7 is a very low sample size, but it would be helpful for us to know if there are several questions for advice around particular subjects, so that we could do some targeted education and perhaps some workshops. It might be a better way to educate people on those kinds of things that they're seeking advice on. So is that something that's possible without breaching any confidentiality?
It is something that we could put together as sort of a follow-up memo to you. I would say one of the reasons we don't really look to do that is because it is always, one always risks exposing sufficient information in order to create a bit of a context that it really inadvertently discloses who might have been asking the question. Because you know, around the table, around the horseshoe, you have much more intimate awareness of your own circumstances. And when we put together a little brief summary of what kinds of advice are being sought, it may inadvertently tip that hand a little bit. But we can certainly go back and put together a little summary of the various types of advice, Councillor, and I think that might be helpful to get a bit of a window on that. And we'll be very, very mindful, though, not to disclose inadvertently who might have been asking what, because we do have a duty of confidentiality. But we're happy to put together a little memorandum to provide back to Council.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. And I think it's particularly helpful this early in the term where we have some new members of council who might at least look at that and see what kinds of questions that they can reach out and ask the integrity for information on.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. As one of those new term counselors, I have a question about the quantitative information provided. I really appreciate the depth of the qualitative data provincially and getting a broad picture of what's happening in Ontario. I have minimal context for understanding what has happened in previous terms in terms of numbers of requests for advice and numbers of conflicts that occurred. So I don't have a benchmark to know. I think you did let us know that near the end, but I would appreciate if it's possible to see some more numbers regarding how we're doing now compared to previously or other municipalities around the province.
So through the mayor, Councillor, I'm going to say that we can provide you with that data. It's certainly your clerk's office will have our previous annual report. But I would say this, that can vary quite significantly from municipality to municipality, depending on what kind of experiences they may be having. For example, there may be a municipality where every issue becomes contentious, and others may, seek to try to, I'm going to say loosely, weaponize the code of conduct, which we really try to discourage. And so you may end up with these aberrations where there may be large numbers of complaints, and many of them may be resolved. There may be 2 or 3 that are reported out. You may have other municipalities where council members are very infrequently seeking advice because they may just not have circumstances where that becomes an issue. So it's hard to gauge what is. I don't know that there's a normal. In other words, we're happy to provide you with the data. I'm not sure that it tells a helpful story or an unhelpful story. It's just, it depends. You can have a small town that has a whole lot of people who ask a lot of questions, or you can have a big city where you have just garden variety issues cropping up. So it doesn't always tell much of a story. What we like to see, when I say it's good housekeeping, we like to see that members of council are aware that there is an integrity commissioner that they can ask their questions of, so that if from time to time they have a question, they ask it. If we see in a municipality that not a single request for advice has been sought over a period of a year or two, it makes one wonder whether council members are aware of their obligations under the Code of Conduct and under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. So we think that this tells not bad story that council members are aware, but it's also a snapshot that is half of the previous term, half of this term. time-wise. But happy to bring you a little better data, try to be more responsive to what you would like to see. We would also, I think, at some point, maybe in 2024, I suppose, look forward to an opportunity to come in and maybe touch base for an in-person short refresher on things if people see any need for that. So we're just putting it out there.
Great, thank you. I'll when data comes, I'll remember what you said and take it with knowing that it doesn't represent. It's impossible to represent the full picture without all the information behind the complaints.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried, and thank you very much, Janice, for being here and presenting the report.
Thank you, Mayor Carleton.
And we will move on here then. The recommendation for the 2022 audit final report with Tracy Smith of BDO. The recommendation that the draft audited 2022 financial statements as presented by BDO be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Winters. Tracy, I'll turn it over to you, and you probably didn't know you were going to have this large an audience tonight.
No, I thought that the public meeting actually was before our presentation.
We thought we'd be nice and have you ahead.
Well, I'd like to thank the council for inviting me here this evening. So as your auditor, we have the responsibility to communicate with those charged with governance, which is you, the council. In your package, you have a communication from us for the audit for 2022. I'm just going to provide a brief overview in the essence of time. I'd like to thank Samantha and the staff at Georgian Bluffs for assisting us during the audit. The communication and the executive summary on page 3, the financial statements, as you indicated, are in draft and they need the approval of council before we can release our final report. We confirm that we are independent of the township, so BDO can give an audit opinion on the financial statements. There were no internal control issues or any matters that came to our attention that needed to be disclosed to council regarding the audit. The unadjusted differences on page 11, there was only one and it was an estimate. And so since it's not material, we can issue our opinion that our clean opinion on the financial statements. As I indicated, there were no other internal controls or deficiencies. So you do have a copy of that written communication if you have any questions about that. I'll go on to the audit report. It is in Appendix A. Management is responsible for preparing these financial statements. It's our responsibility as the auditor to give an opinion on those financial statements. We were engaged to perform an audit, which is the highest level of assurance that can be provided by a public accounting firm. And our opinion is in the second paragraph. In our opinion, these financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the township in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. Therefore, it's a clean opinion and there were no issues or concerns that came to our attention. On page 5, you'll find the statement of financial position, which is often known as a balance sheet. It is at a point in time on December 31st of 2022. It is consolidated, so it includes 75% of the Intertownship Fire Department and 50% of the biodigester. On December 31st of 2022, the township had financial assets of $26.4 million, the largest asset being cash of $24.4 million. That's an increase of $2 million, which related to your contributions to reserves. Liabilities totaled $4.8 million. The largest of that is accounts payable, which is just normal trade payables and developer deposits. It's increased over the prior year because you've had increased developer deposits during the year, and it does fluctuate depending on the timing of your capital projects. The deferred revenue, I just want to note that those includes your unspent grants. What was previously referred to as the gas tax, now it's the Canada Building Fund, Canada Community Building Fund. In terms of the long-term liabilities, your long-term liabilities, you only had $617,000 remaining. You repaid $388,000 during the year. So you have repaid, you did make a significant pay down of that debt and the airport debt is now fully paid off. That brings you down to the net financial assets of $21.6 million. So that is a key financial indicator. It's positive. That means you have resources for the future. It does indicate a strong financial position. Your tangible capital assets includes your land, your buildings, all your physical assets, was $53.3 million. That is at cost, less amortization, not the replacement cost. Brings us down to the accumulated surplus of $75 million. That's your equity, both monetary and physical assets. The details are in note 7, but it does include the $53 million in your capital assets and also $23 million in reserves. On page 6 is the statement of operations. So that's the transactions for the year. So again, it is consolidated. This is at a very high level. So this is meant as an annual reporting. You do have the more details and comparisons to budget that your staff present to you all throughout the year. There were no real significant changes to that reporting that you received from your staff. So the revenues for the year were $17.3 million. That includes all your external revenues for both operating and capital. The expenses totaled $15.7 million. It is important to note that the budget column does not include amortization. You're not required to budget for amortization. As a council, you budget for capital assets and transfers to reserve, which show in different parts of the financial statements under public sector accounting rules. So when you compare the budget number of 13.7 to 15.7, it doesn't mean that you overspent. It means that 15.7 includes the amortization. That brings you down to the annual surplus of $1.6 million. It's important to note that that's not your operating surplus on this page. The operating surplus, though, was ironically the same. So you did have $1.6 million for your annual budgeted surplus, which council approved to transfer the working capital reserve. The annual surplus, so yeah, it was transferred to the reserves. The annual surplus on this page follows on to the next page, which is the changes in the net financial assets, and you adjust for the capital assets and the transfers to reserve that you would budget for in your normal operating budget. That brings us down to a net increase in financial assets on the changes in net financial assets. So that increase, you'll see the budget numbers negative. So yeah, in this case, you can be either negative or positive depending on where you are in your capital asset cycle with buying in capital assets. So the $2 million positive means that you did put money into reserves during the year. And the last statement on there is a statement of cash flows. That's what happens to your physical cash. Your physical cash, you brought in $4.5 million in the middle of the page from operations. You spent $2.2 million on capital purchases, and you repaid $388,000 in debt. So the net change in cash was 1.9. So overall, the township is in strong financial position. You had an operating surplus of 1.6 million. You have $23 million in reserves, and you have very little external debt. So indicating a good financial position. So that was a very high level overview. So hopefully not the audience is not all asleep. I tried to go fast.
Thank you, Tracy. Are there any comments or questions from council? Seeing none, I will say thank you again, and I will call the vote.
Thank you.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So we are moving on now to public hearings. Before I read the recommendation here, I would like to just update everyone. Normally, when we have more than 10 people registered to speak, we allow 2 minutes per person as per procedural bylaw. However, we didn't advertise it as that way. In the agenda, it's printed as 5 minutes. So we're going to waive that procedural bylaw to allow for up to 5 minutes, but we would ask that anyone who is speaking make sure that you're bringing new information forward and that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, because we're going to be a while on this one listening. So I will turn to council. Could I have someone make a motion and second to the effect that we're going to waive the procedural bylaw this evening? Councillor Windhurst, Councillor Coburn, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the recommendation here is that the regular meeting of council be recessed to hold public hearings for number 1, zoning amendment application Z07-21 and B05-21 for Melina Jansen and John McMinn. Number 2, zoning amendment application Z02-23 and 42T-2022-10 for Cobble Beach Phase 3, The Dell. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Shoaldice. Is there any discussion? Calling the vote now, and then, okay, that makes sense. I will call the vote then. All in favor? Next. That's coming. That's coming. Just. So I'll call that again. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we're starting with 8.1. So this meeting has been called to consider zoning bylaw amendment application Z07-21 for property legally described as Range Culpoise Part Lot 30. Madam Acting Clerk, please advise the method by which notice of this public meeting was given.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Notice of this public meeting was given by ordinary mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property by email to all the prescribed bodies on June 5th, 2023, posted at the subject property and posted on the Township of Georgian Bluffs website. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Georgian Bluffs before the proposed zoning bylaw is adopted or passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of Georgian Bluffs to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. The person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Local Planning Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party.
Thank you, Madam Acting Clerk. Planner, please proceed with your review of the application.
Thank you. I'm here to present application Z-07-21. The purpose of which is to request relief from the zoning bylaw to permit a lot frontage of 9.9 meters where 36 meters is required, and a lot area of 0.35 hectares where 0.4 hectares is required for a proposed severed parcel, and a lot frontage of 86.8 meters where 100 meters is required, and a lot area of 0.49 hectares where 1 hectare is required for a proposed retained parcel, and to permit a storage container as an accessory use on the proposed retained parcel. This application was submitted in addition to application B-05-21, which is to sever an area of 0.35 hectares from the subject property. And the zoning bylaw amendment requested today is considered a condition of that consent approval. So in summary, the subject property is characterized by steep slopes across much of the property and is designated both inland lakes and shoreline settlement area and hazard lands within the county official plan. The proposed storage structure requested on the retained lands is located within the hazard lands designation. And the county official plan has policies requiring that consultation with the county and Grey Sauble Conservation Authority is done regarding these hazard land areas to mitigate any potential adverse impacts. At this time, as of today, the township has not received comments from Grey Sauble Conservation Authority nor the county. And so sufficient review cannot yet be completed. In addition, we are still awaiting comments from Saugeen Ojibwe Nation as well. So it is the recommendation of township staff that council defer application Z-07-21 to the next available council meeting to allow additional opportunity for applicable agency comments to be received and sufficiently addressed.
Thank you. And I note that no members of the public registered with the clerk to provide comments in support of or in opposition to the application. So next is Questa Planning agent for the applicant, and applicant Graham Barker and John McMinn are present. And I'll ask if someone wishes to speak to this now. Okay. Come to the podium then, please.
John's online as well, I believe. Hi, I'm Graham Barker. Been a taxpayer for 65 years in Keppel Township and Georgian Bluffs Township, both as a family and then with my partners of the subject property for 17 years. We've been living here permanently for a couple of years, so we have a deep commitment to the township. I'm here to ask a single question. How long does it take to draw a line 133 meters long? So far, it's taken 3 years. So I'm here to register our extreme frustration on behalf of myself, my wife, Karina Nzunza. John may have some words himself, and his wife, Melena Jansen. Both of them are architects. I studied urban planning. We know a couple of things about doing this right. Something's wrong in the process. We're stuck. We do have Questa Planning as a consulting agency. It's not clear to me at all. When I logged on today at 2 o'clock, expecting to see approved, and I read the word deferred, I was completely and utterly shocked at why we are still at this stage in the process. It finally took 2 years to get through Grey County last January. It's been sitting with Georgian Bluffs Township, one of the most beautiful places on earth. Believe me, I've traveled everywhere and seen it, but you're letting me down. You're letting my partners down. I need some help with this process to expedite, either remove the conditions for consultation that were referenced by the planner, or short circuit that decision cycle or consultation cycle in a dramatic fashion. This has been sitting out for 3 years. Sure, when we first built the house in 2010, we went through everything with the Grey County Conservation Authority. We went through everything with the SON. We went through everything with the township. We passed all the approvals required. All we're doing is drawing a line through the middle of the property. The use cases on either side, a house and a harbor, remain the same. The owners remain the same. We're just splitting apart in a friendly severance. So why are we sitting here with no dates known in the report that I read today, an hour and a half before this meeting, suddenly find out it's floating? As far as I'm concerned, this is floating out in the ether. It's completely unacceptable as a long-standing taxpayer of this zone and someone heavily committed to the well-being of our area. I would ask for consideration in this regard from the planning staff. I would ask for expedition of these processes, and I would ask for council support in a hasty approval of the requested severance once you have those approvals, unless they can be done away with, which is really what I'm requesting. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Barker, for your comments. And I appreciate the comments you've made, as all of council does. We don't have answers and we're not giving answers here this evening. I see someone online with the initial CC with their hand up, so please go ahead. I don't know who I'm referring to here. Is that
Certainly,
okay?
sure. It's Genevieve Scott from Questa Planning Consultants.
Okay, go ahead, please, Genevieve.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to give a bit of background to council as well as staff and members of the public, just in addition to Mr. Barker's comments. So the subject lands are owned by 4 equal partners, which are Graham Barker, Krina Zunza, John McMinn, and Milana Jansen. And so what they're looking to do is sever their waterfront property. It contains 2 different uses. So one is a small marina use, and the other is an existing residential dwelling. As Marilyn commented on, the severance will create a lot of approximately 5,000 meters squared for the marina use, and approximately 3,500 meter square lot for the single detached residential use. And I don't know if we have the ability to maybe put the site plan up. If staff could do that, that would be much appreciated. But just to give a little bit of background with respect to the file. So when we first initiated this proposal, it was about early to mid 2021. And so at that time, it was determined that an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment would be required to permit the consent, as the property at that time was rurally designated. Shortly after we submitted the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw, it was suggested by county planning staff to hold the application in abeyance until official plan amendment 11 was adopted, which they had anticipated to be maybe a 4 to 6 month process. Unfortunately, it ended up to be about a 2-year process, and so this application has been significantly delayed. That being said, it's now in effect, and so right now we're looking at no longer a need for the official plan amendment, and just the zoning bylaw amendment to implement the proposed consent. And so, as indicated earlier by staff, the zoning bylaw amendment will provide some relief from lot area and frontage requirements. And on the marina lot, we have requested a shipping container storage use that would be located in close proximity to the marina use or the harbor infrastructure. So we feel that separating the uses makes sense. The rezoning and consent are consistent with the provincial policy statement. It's going to remain compatible with the rural character of the site as well as the surrounding land use. It conforms to the Grey County OP policies for both inland lakes and shoreline area, as well as the hazard land designation. Both of these designations permit existing resource-based recreational uses. There's no change to the use on the site. And in consideration of the fact that this has really been quite some time that the landowners have been waiting to get this before council and to finalize this consent, barring any concerns from the county and the Conservation Authority, and as they have not commented or provided any comment within the time frame under the Planning Act, in consideration of the fact there's no change to the land use, we certainly would respectfully request that the bylaw is brought forward expediently, ideally to next council's meeting. And thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. And I see someone else with their hand up on there. Is this Mr. McMinn?
Thank you, Your Honor. It is. I would also just say that, so I'm with one of the 4 partners in the current property, and with my wife, Melena Jensen, our wishes to sever the property from the residential portion. I just want to also make a comment that we maintain this small harbor. There are a number of boats in the harbor who are landowners on White Cloud Island. We provide access to those island cottages through our harbor, and therefore we help to provide a tax base to the municipality for those lands on White Cloud Island. And so I think that we are trying to do the right thing in terms of making this work. And as Mr. Barker said, we really would like to have help with the process. Genevieve has outlined the steps that have been made. We understand there are no objections. We have sought opinions from neighbors. We have full support. We are attempting to do everything in full compliance with all the requirements. And I can only reiterate the frustration that Mr. Barker feels that this has been a very long process. We've been very patient, and we would really like to have the assistance of the council and staff to help to push this thing through so that we can carry on with a use that's been there for about 40 years already. So we would simply and respectfully ask for the support of the council members to carry forward this request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMinn. Does council have any questions regarding the proposed application? Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton, and through you to our planner and CAO. Do we have any notion as to when the additional comments from Grace Sobel and Son might be forthcoming?
Through you, Mayor, and to the councillor, the principal planner may have additional comments to provide as well. But no, it is rather unusual that we haven't received comments in the time that's been that it has elapsed since it was circulated. However, given the request to establish the proposed storage container within the hazard lands, and given previous discussion with the county prior to, or sorry, with the Grace Sobel Conservation prior to circulation, it's important to determine conformity with the official plan policies that we consult with these agencies. As of today, we still had heard nothing back, and perhaps the principal planner might have additional information on that, as I believe the most recent contact went through him.
Thank you. And Michael, do you have any comments there?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor, to Councillor Coburn. We have reached out to Son, Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and the Conservation Authority. I'll also reach out to the county staff tomorrow to make sure that we get comments back in time to prepare a report for the next available council meeting once we receive those comments.
Thank you. And Councillor Winters.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to our principal planner, what is the statutory requirement for commenting agencies? I mean, this seems like this has been going on far too long.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillor Winters, the Planning Act does provide provision or regulations in terms of comments. Typically, the circulation date is 20 days. That's when we put comments out. And normally you would expect to see comments back within a 30 to 45 day period following that. We do also generally, like in a lot of our notices, provide a due date for comments. So that would have been June 28th, given the circulation. However, it's also recognized there's a lot happening these days for staff turnover, what have you. I think also what happens is sometimes applications tend to fall by the wayside. That's why I'm going to personally take this one on to make sure that receive comments from the local commenting agencies.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? So I will now call the vote on the motion on the decision. The recommendation being that application Z 07-21 is recommended for deferral to a future meeting until such time as comments from the appropriate agencies can be received and addressed. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn. Is there any
Pardon me,
further?
through you, Mayor.
Yeah.
I would just request that we establish a date for the next meeting for this to be heard so that the existing circulation can stand.
So our next council meeting is August 16th.
If that could be included within the motion.
Okay. So
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to turn to staff then. We are amending the motion to add that. So I now need a mover and a seconder on an amended motion.
Yes, through you, Mayor Carlton, I would just recommend a slight amendment that it would be recommended for deferral to the August 16th council meeting to allow appropriate time for comments to be received.
Okay, so could I have a mover and a seconder on the amended? Councillor Winters? Deputy Mayor Pringle? Is there any further discussion? I will call the vote on the amended motion. All in favor? That is carried. Now we're back to the main motion. There's no further discussion. I will call the vote on that one as well. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So I will now call for an adjournment for this hearing. I need a mover and a seconder for adjournment, please. Councillor Day? Councillor Scholdice? All in favor? That is carried. The public hearing is now adjourned. So we are moving on to 8.2. 8.2.1, sorry. Report for Z 02-23 for Georgian Villas Incorporated. So as I stated earlier, due to the volume of registrations, we will call participants in the order of registration to provide comment. Registrants are encouraged to add new information than previously presented and avoid duplicating comments which have already been presented. And as I stated earlier, we are asking that you stay to that 5 minutes or less. So this meeting has been called to consider zoning bylaw amendment application Z 02-23 for property legally described as part of lot 28 and 34, concession 3 Sarawak. Madam Acting Clerk, please advise the method by which notice of this public meeting was given.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Notice of this public meeting was given by ordinary mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property, by email to all the prescribed bodies on June 14th, 2023, posted at the subject property and posted on the Township of Georgian Bluffs website. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Georgian Bluffs before the proposed zoning bylaw is adopted or passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of Georgian Bluffs to the local planning appeal tribunal. The person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party.
Thank you, Madam Acting Clerk. And I will turn over to the planner to please proceed with your review of the application.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report that I prepared for tonight's council meeting provides an overview of the application to amend the zoning bylaw for the Township of Georgian Bluffs, submitted concurrently with a plan of subdivision application 42T-2022-10 to the County of Grey, consisting of 65 single detached residential parcels, 3 open space blocks, and 1 memorial block dedicated to neighboring Indigenous communities on the lands legally described prior. This report is meant for information purposes only. Following agency review of the applications and the public consultation process, staff will prepare a more thorough analysis of the relevant policies within the PPS and the official plans for the County of Grey and the Township of Georgian Bluffs. At this point, staff will provide recommendations for council's consideration on conditions of draft plan approval as part of the County of Grey's review of the planned subdivision application, and provide recommendations for council's consideration regarding the application to amend the zoning bylaw. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have or questions from residents in attendance tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think next we are moving on to members of the public who have registered with the clerk to provide comments. So I will start with,
Sorry,
sir, go ahead.
Madam Mayor. We also have a presentation by the development group. That shouldn't take too long, and then we can move on to public comments if you wish.
Okay. So we have this is the agent for the applicant.
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Okay,
Yes.
please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I will keep my comments very brief, and the primary purpose of my attendance here this evening is to answer any questions that staff may not be able to answer. So I'm just going to share a quick presentation with council. So this is to discuss the zoning bylaw amendment application Z0223 in the township of Georgian Bluffs within the Cobble Beach area. I'm sure most of the public are familiar with the location of the subject land, and I hope you can see my screen, Madam Chair.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the title page. I'm on slide number 2 on my screen. It's just a location map showing where the subject property is, and it's essentially at the end of McLeese Drive, where there's currently a
If I
bulb.
could just stop you for a minute, I have the acting clerk waving at me here, so.
Apologies, TJ. Your screen is very small in here and we have a large number of participants. So I have shared my screen in hopes that we can utilize this one for for a better experience for everybody in council chambers.
No issues whatsoever. I only have a few slides, so I'll just ask you to go to the next one, please.
Okay, we're at the second slide.
Okay, so this is the red star indicates the location of the subject property. It's at the end of McLeese Drive, essentially north of the clubhouse for the existing Cobble Beach golf course, and where the current bulb is at the end of McLeese Drive. Go to the next slide. The proposed development includes 65 residential lots. These lots will be similar in style in terms of the housing that will result to what is already existing in Cobble Beach. Obviously, Cobble Beach has a variety of dwellings, from townhouses to single detached dwellings of various sizes. This proposal includes lots in the range of 55 feet up to 65 feet. It also includes open space blocks and a memorial block for what is more commonly known as the Nanny Nibiqua Memorial on the east side of McLeese Drive. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is the Township of Georgian Bluffs official plan. You can see that the subject property is located well within the primary settlement area that's already designated for development. Next slide. And in the County of Grey official plan, you can see that the subject land is well within the residential designated land as part of the northern end of Cobble Beach. So in essence, the zoning bylaw and the draft plan of subdivision application that have been submitted are implementing the existing policy permissions that are within the township and county official plans. And that is also why there is no official plan amendment required for this application. Next slide. The zoning bylaw amendment itself requires a change from the PD zone, which is a planned development zone. This zone was brought into place in, I believe, 2003, indicating that this area is planned for development. This is a developable parcel of the overall Cobble Beach ownership. You can see that there's also additional PD zoned lands to the north and to the west, which eventually in the fullness of time will also reflect residential development. However, applications for those lands will be forthcoming in the future, and the public will have another chance to comment at that time. The proposed zoning would be an R18 zone which would allow the 55 to 60-foot lots that are proposed through the draft plan of subdivision with a similar housing style that already exists in Cobble Beach. To the next slide, please. So we have submitted 2 applications, a zoning bylaw amendment application and a draft plan of subdivision application. The township processes the zoning and the county processes the draft plan of subdivision. However, they are being considered at the same time. Comments and circulations are happening all together. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the zoning bylaw amendment in front of Township Council, and for Township Council to receive comments from the public. We are also here to listen and hear what the public has to say. That the response to the comments after tonight may result in changes to the plan, or it may not, depending on the nature of the comments received and how the owner and development team decide to proceed after today. And I believe the next slide is my last one. This is my contact information. If anybody has any questions that they would like to ask after tonight's meeting, you're welcome to contact me directly at my office through telephone or email. And just for everybody's information, I've been working with the McLeese family in Cobble Beach for approximately 18 years now. So I do have a bit of history on the site, and I'm happy to have a discussion or receive comments from anybody if they're not comfortable raising them in this evening in a group setting. Thank you very much for your time. Those are all my comments, and I will observe and listen to the questions and assist if I can.
Thank you. So we now turn to the public, starting with I think I'll get you to come to the microphone because anybody online did not hear what you just said. And so I have a list here. Madam Acting Clerk, please.
Through you, Mayor Carlton. We did already waive the procedure bylaw for the time allowance, so I think you're covered there in terms of your procedural base. In front of you, there is a list in order of registration. So I would suggest that we stick to that just for fairness.
Okay, so I will call names as they are here. If we get to one of the names that you've consolidated, then I would invite you to step up at that point.
Oh,
so
also a package that we put together for everybody over there with our concerns and some exhibits in it as well.
Okay, so can someone make sure those get passed around up here?
Through you, Mayor Carlton, we did advise that we would circulate it at the time of her presentation.
Okay, so we'll get those passed along. The first one that I have then on here on this list is Georgian Villas, Inc. So who is speaking on their behalf? And I see, Councillor Scholdice, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick comment here. I know I'm not present in the chambers tonight, but is it possible for me to get a copy of those? Oh, thanks, Kathy. A copy of the papers that has been being handed out. If you could leave it on my desk there.
Yes, I believe that's happened already.
Okay, thank you.
Carla?
Through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillor Scholdice. Rayburn is working on scanning a copy of the presentation package to him via email.
Okay, so you
Thank
should
you, Rayburn.
receive that
Thanks, Council.
shortly, Isaac. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're back to Georgian Villas, Inc., who is speaking on their behalf.
Madam Mayor, I believe Georgian Villas Inc. was us. We are the owners, or I'm representing the owners. So I think
Okay.
Go to the next name.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't following on that one. Okay.
No
Because I
worries.
had you listed somewhere separate. Okay, so next on the list is Ellen Jefferson. Okay, so Ellen, if you're online, do you wish to speak at this point? And you're muted, I believe.
Hello?
Hello, go ahead.
Okay,
We are deferring our comments. Cindy Shanks is presenting on our behalf.
Okay, so I'm hearing from Ellen and Cameron then?
Yes.
yes, so
Okay, thank you.
we've raised our concerns with the speakers who will be speaking tonight and concur with all of them.
Okay, thank you. I still have to follow through my list that's in front of me. So Rona Lynn Ferguson.
I have also deferred mine to Cindy Shanks and two others who are in the council chambers tonight.
Okay, thank you. And Brian Ferguson.
Also.
Thank you. Alan Balking. So Alan Balking. We're not seeing online. I'm going to put a question mark there then, just in case. Kathleen Hansen. I have E. Hughes and M. Bentley.
Yes, we did not register as wanting to speak.
Okay, so you're just here listening then?
Correct, and we said that at the time of registration.
Okay, thank you. Murray Davenport is next.
Okay, Mayor Susan and members of council, I sent a message, our message to each member of council this afternoon. My wife Pat and I have owned lands to the south of Churchside Road East for the last 50 years in Lot 27 Concession 3. Now formerly in Township of Sarawak, now in the Township of Georgian Bluffs. The County of Grey issued conditions of draft plan approval for a 28-lot subdivision on these lands, dated July 23, 2020. The original 3-year expiry date was July 23 this year. However, the county has extended that expiry date for conditions of draft plan approval until July 23rd, 2026. The plan of subdivision is dependent on the Township of Georgian Bluffs assuming the Cobble Beach sewage treatment plant and extending the sanitary sewer to Churchside Road East. Township of Georgian Bluffs report number OPS 2020-014 dated March the 4th, 2020 states that an amending agreement was reached with Georgian Villas Inc. and passed by bylaw number 2018-101. The bylaw 2018-101 states the township undertakes and agrees to construct the extension of works in 2019 or as soon as after as possible, as reasonably possible, but in any event no later than January the 1st, 2021. The sanitary sewer works have not been extended on July the 12th, 2023, today. The sanitary sewer is planned to be constructed along McLeish Drive from the existing street southerly through the approved plan of subdivision to Churchside Road East. Crozier Engineering was retained to prepare engineering design drawings for this phase of the Cobble Beach plan of subdivision. And we have actually received a copy of the drawings. However, the sanitary sewer has never been constructed. Consideration of rezoning the subject lands within the Cobble Beach Phase 3, known as the Dell, from the planned development PD zone to R18 zone to permit the proposed residential development on subject lands is premature until such time as the agreement between the Georgian Villas Inc. and the Township of Georgian Bluffs which extends the sanitary sewer to Churchside Road East, has been honored. And please forward a copy of any Township of Georgian Bluff decision on the Cobble Beach Phase 3, the Dell, for our records. Thank you.
Thank you, Murray. So moving on, next is Lori McCannell.
I'm deferring to the presentation by the people from Cobble.
Thank you, Lori. Jennifer Sparks.
I'm also deferring to the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Smith. Okay. Karen Davies. Thank you. Cindy Shanks. Okay. If you would step up to the podium then. Thank you, Cindy. And go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Madam Mayor and Council. A number of residents have expressed serious concerns about the proposed development, Phase 3, the Dell at Cobble Beach. We are not against seeing the land developed, but we want to make sure that the impact on the residents and the natural environment are properly addressed. My name is Cindy Shanks, and I've lived at Cobble Beach since 2017. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to present to you today. The goal of this process is to manage growth in a way that preserves quality of life for existing and future residents while minimizing the environmental impact on the subject lands. We want to see our community grow, but not at the expense of the enjoyment and safety of our residents, golfers, and guests. The notice of public meeting sign for the proposed development at Cobble Beach, the Dell, was updated in the past week, notifying residents of this public meeting today. This notice sign is located in an area with very little foot traffic. If I had not contacted the township, the residents of Cobble Beach would have relied on the posted note sign and therefore had less than a week to submit their concerns. This is a lack of transparency. Thank you, Michael Benner, for mailing the notice to the residents of Cobble Beach, although not all received it. A few weeks prior to a public meeting is not a very effective way for allowing the residents and public to participate in the development review process. These are our areas of concern: roads, construction traffic, and emergency exit, environmental impact, increased density, trail systems, and green space. Dave Anderson was going to speak next, but I know you have to go through your list, so he will continue the presentation or however you would like to do that. Thank you.
If I could just ask everyone, perhaps we will continue with this presentation and then we'll go back to the list of names that I have. So Dave, if you would like to carry on ahead here, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Dave Anderson. I'm sorry.
Mayor Carlton, we don't have him on the list, so just a consent of council to allow the presentation, please.
Does council agree? I see heads nodding, so carry on. Go
Yes,
ahead.
Thank you.
Okay.
Carry on then. I've been a property owner in Georgian Bluff since 2013 and a Cobble Beach resident since 2020. We, the Cobble Beach residents represented here, are unaware if any thought has been given to the impact on the community of Cobble Beach throughout this entire construction period. Cobble Beach Drive is a main pedestrian thoroughfare for community residents as they walk for pleasure, walk their dogs, stroll with children and grandchildren, and ride their bicycles. Children who reside at Cobble Beach also walk this road to their school bus at Grey Road 1, and a portion of their walk is on Cobble Beach, the road itself. It is currently the sole access for all vehicles. Construction traffic is and has been a huge safety concern at Cobble Beach, and the impending heavy construction traffic, air pollution, and noise pollution for Phase 3, the Dell, is a pressing concern to all of us. The wear and tear on the township roads should also be a consideration. There is one in and out entrance off of Grey Road 1, and the proposed plan for Phase 3 the Dell does not include any additional access roads. In the master concept plan, there was a provision made for a road from Presqu'île Road that went between the 6th green and the 7th tee to allow for a road to run down between the 3rd tees and the 2nd green to Phase 3, the Dell. and eventually meet up with McLeese Drive. This construction road would allow direct access to this part of the development. It would divert all construction traffic from Cobble Beach Road and McLeese Drive, and could also act as an emergency exit. In your package, there is an Exhibit 1 that shows the road from Presqu'île, and Exhibit 2, I think, which I mentioned coming up, is just a different picture of the same road. As residents, we are baffled as to why the developer would not choose to access from Presqu'île Road, as this would certainly have less impact on all the residents and the guests of Cobble Beach. There is a cost when you eventually convert a construction road to a standard road, and that meets the municipality's requirements, but we feel that's just the cost of doing business the right way. There is a health, safety, rapid response, and liability issue that we see in that Cobble Beach does not have an emergency exit. If for some reason the access was blocked and first responders, police, firefighters, and paramedics could not gain access, then serious health setbacks or death could undoubtedly result. A second exit entrance would eliminate this issue. The developer held a virtual meeting on Thursday, July 6th for the residents and mentioned that they were considering the use of the existing service access road, which is a gravel road, and it runs from Churchside Road down to McLeese Drive. It's simply a construction road. If the Churchside Road is the chosen path, all construction traffic would pass along McLeese Drive, a township road, which hosts access to the beach club, the dock, the driving range, the clubhouse, the tennis courts, the bocce ball court, the beach volleyball court, and access to the golf course for the first hole, the 10th hole, and the 17th hole. McLeese Drive is also the only entrance and exit for the Hollows and Blue Bay Villas condominium developments, where 81 units exist, or very soon will exist. This would create a dangerous situation for staff, golfers, residents, and guests. The disruption and destruction by construction vehicles will be extensive into and out of Phase 3 for an extended period of time if McLeese Drive is the only route. And on Exhibit 3 in your documents, we show the road that was proposed from Churchside Road across to McLeese Drive, and the Hollows and Blue Bay Villas are highlighted in brown. And if I may, Mayor, my notes here say that Deborah Reeser will carry on with the presentation, if that's okay with you folks.
Okay, and I think Deborah's name is actually on here. Not quite in order, but that would be fine. Go ahead, Deborah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Deborah Reeser, and I've been a Cobble Beach resident since 2017. And as Cindy already mentioned, many of the residents at Cobble Beach are significantly concerned about the environmental impact, increased density, and the trail system that exists currently at Cobble Beach. Apparently, an environmental impact study that was completed in 2006 is being used to determine planning for this current project. We're not sure that an impact study and the findings of that from 2006 are still relevant in 2023. That's the first concern. So the three main areas are essentially trees, I guess two areas, trees, water, and density. So the Cobble Beach Development Functional Servicing Report of January 26, 2003 states the following. The subject property is currently a grassed field with open space. As exhibits 5 to 9 indicate, this is not the case. This area is primarily mature trees, extensive forests with significantly beech nut trees, which are on the Ontario's endangered species list. The report indicates that the community that there will be community parkland and open space. This also does not appear to be the case. With respect to the water flow, most of the site water will flow into the adjacent pond to the east, Pond 5. That's exhibit, I believe, I think 10, 11 shows Pond 5. That's the pond along, well, it's the main pond down by the clubhouse. So most of the site water from the development will flow into that pond, which of course discharges into Georgian Bay. This pond also currently receives runoff from the golf course that's directed into the pond via the existing storm sewers and overland flow route. That's also exhibit 1011, which shows Pond 5. So there's a significant amount of, there would be a significant increase in the amount of discharge into that pond. So we just don't know really what, at this point, from the information that we have, what provisions have been made for storm water management because of this. We're kind of assuming that the Ministry of the Environment has to approve a storm water management plan. So we're not aware if that's the case yet. So this area around the pond is a huge breeding ground for a number of birds and wildlife, and one of which is Baltimore Oriole, whose homing instinct is to come back to the same area every year. There's a variety of birds. There's a warbler that's also on the endangered species list. It's got a lot of different water mammals and pond life. With respect to the density concern, it was originally zoned for 59 detached homes. This has increased to 65 detached homes. I believe that 5 of those homes are immediately adjacent to the pond. I think lots 60 to 65 is immediately adjacent to the pond that is of concern. So that's the concern about the pond and the wildlife and the environment in that area. The trees in particular are of concern. So there is a provincial policy statement of 2020 that states that a healthy, active community should be promoted by planning and providing for a full range of publicly accessible and natural settings for parkland, open space, trails, and linkages. The trails at Cobble have already been decreased to a certain extent. So we're just anticipating that that's going to be further eroded. We're hoping that this development will respect that provincial policy statement of 2020 and that the natural elements around of Cobble will be respected. The proposed development as it currently stands should be amended to maintain and promote additional parkland, open space, and trails. Thanks for your time, and I think Cindy is going to provide a conclusion.
Thank you. So our presentation has highlighted some of our concerns. Prior to making a final decision regarding this proposed development, we would ask that you walk the proposed site and see the environmental and residential impact this development will have. We will not rely on the developer's promise to do their best. We are asking that a new construction access road from Presqu'île Road to Phase 3, the Dell, that will accommodate all construction vehicles prior to the commencement of the development of Phase 3, the Dell, and eventually becoming a second access road emergency exit. Proper signage on Gray Road 1 at Cobble Beach Drive directing all Phase 3 construction traffic to the new construction access road. A new environmental impact study to be completed, or at a minimum, an update to the original study. The Ministry of the Environment to assess and approve the stormwater management plan. And we ask that the subdivision plan be amended to remove the residential single designation from lots 60 to 65 and show that area as open space, as an open space block. We ask that the balance of our concerns be addressed through conditions of draft plan approval. Again, I wish to thank the Town Council for the opportunity to present our concerns, as well as your time, attention, and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on, Wendy Dobson. Thank you. Peter Reeser. Patty Hall. Is she online? Patty Hall? Okay. Paul McCannell. Bill and Barb Bardswick. Yep. Greg Taylor. Yep. Gabriella Pittock. Thank you. Sorry, did I say your last name wrong? Okay, and Charles Pittock. Thank you. Mark Cherrick. Susan Richardson. And I have Brian Richardson as well. Okay. Okay, so council, does council have any questions regarding the proposed application? Seeing none, I will now call for a vote on the motion on the decision, the recommendation being that report PL 2023.30 be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will now call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And I will now call for an adjournment of this hearing. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Councillor Day. I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. This public hearing is now adjourned. So, unless you all want to stay and listen to the rest of this meeting, we'll perhaps take a brief break and allow you to make your way out. Sure, you can stay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's break until 6:40. (6:40), we are back. So consent agenda. Recommendation that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the actually, I should ask first, are there any items anyone wants pulled off the consent agenda tonight? Seeing none. That Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the consent agenda for information as circulated, less items, no, we're doing it all, and that all actions contained therein are hereby approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn? Councillor Winters? Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Do we have Councillor Scholdice back with us? Correspondence 11.1, the invitation from Walker Construction Lunch and Learn. Does any member wish to provide comment there, or does anyone wish to sign up to go on that as well? Councillor Day, Councillor Winters, I would add my name to that list as well. And I think we're reaching out to some other staff as well to include them.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, yes, we are going to extend the invitation to all of our operations staff and a number of our office staff that might be interested in participating in this lunch and learn session.
Okay, so we can rely on staff to respond back. Councillor Scholdice, were you wishing to attend that as well? The
Oh,
Walker lunch.
Sorry, I was away for a couple seconds. Are you guys referring to the Saturday Shell Lake event?
No, we're at the Walker Construction Lunch and Learn.
Oh, when is that? Sorry.
July 20th?
Yep, I should be able to attend that. I'm off that day. Yep,
Okay, very good. So we will add your name to that list.
sure.
Okay, so we don't, I think,
Sorry, one last question. Can I just confirm the date or the time on that, so rather?
11 till 2.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we actually then need a motion to authorize any members of council who are attending to be reimbursed for that time frame. So could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day? Councillor Winters? I will call the vote. All in favor? But that's what we have to do to give staff direction. Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. 11.2, Kevin Ward, request to delegate read block 75 waste collection Cobble Beach. Is Mr. Ward online or? Oh, I knew that. Sorry. Does any member wish to provide comment on this? Councillor Winters?
Yeah. My only comment is I don't feel comfortable breaking protocol again on this. This will be the third time I would assume that this group is delegated. And I think we should wait for the staff report before we do much more.
I think later in the agenda, we will have a notice of motion to bring this forward with the staff report and such. So we'll wait for that to happen. So we will just be receiving that for information. So we don't need to do anything further. Okay. Committee reports. 12.1, Committee of the Whole. Recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on July 5th, 2023 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2023-066 to COW 2023-073. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle? Councillor Shouldice? Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to 13, staff reports. There are none. Zoning bylaws. 14.2, other bylaws. The recommendation that bylaw 2023-036 being a bylaw to authorize an amending quadripartite tiered emergency response agreement with the County of Grey, Municipality of Meaford, and Intertownship Fire Department Joint Board of Management be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Councillor Day. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The next item is the recommendation that bylaw 2023-037 being a bylaw to authorize an amending tripartite tiered emergency response agreement with the County of Grey and the town of South Bruce Peninsula be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day, Councillor Shouldice. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is that bylaw 2023-044 being a bylaw to reduce the speed limit on concession 17 and Lindenwood Road to 60 kilometers per hour be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters and Councillor Shouldice. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. No unfinished business under new business. 16.1 waste management transition CMO contract. Further to notice of discussion by Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn at the June 21st, 2023 meeting of council. Councillor Coburn, did you wish to speak to this, or are we just simply going back to item 9.4.2 for the staff report? New business.
With apologies, I am having trouble remembering what it was that I was asking to be brought back for that. This is waste management transition. Okay, sorry. Right. So during the transition to the circular method of dealing with compost in the province, there was some question about the contract, the CMO contract in the meantime, and if we were bound by that, and if there were some questions that perhaps needed to still be answered. But I thought, Niall, that you had given us a response on that, or were you going to do a verbal update this evening?
As per through you, Mayor Carlton, as per the direction of council, I have actually prepared a report, which is the memo report that's associated to the agenda.
So that is the item that is 9.4.2, which must have been on consent agenda.
Apologies, I guess I should have pulled it from the consent agenda then. I didn't do that. Can we go back to that now then?
So we could go back and discuss that one at this point, or
For you, Mayor Carlton, that report was received for information. So if there are any questions about the waste management transition, it would be appropriate to have that discussion now.
okay. So do you have questions, Councillor Coburn, or?
So yeah, I'm reading your conclusion or the concluding statement. I don't think I do. I think anyway it's a bit after the fact. I wonder if we should have been questioning that contract at the time, but since it's signed and we're bound to follow that, then I guess we will hope for the best. I don't know if you have anything more to add, CAO Mobley.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillor Coburn. At the time we brought the initial report forward, I think it was February of this year. A review of the contract suggested, both by ourselves and by our waste management contract to Waste Management Services out of Mount Forest. We both feel that the existing contract we have for services with waste management cover the transitional contract with CMO. And so, yes, we are bound by the terms and conditions of the CMO contract. Those are terms and conditions which are with the township, not with our contractor, but we feel that our contract with the contractor covers off the elements of the contract with CMO that we are upholding to. The one example, the one area of some lack of clarity, not just with us, but with other municipalities going through the transition period, is the 4% rule. And the 4% rule is really speaking to the level of contamination in the blue box stream. So the CMO contract holds us to a rolling average of no greater than 4% contamination in the blue box stream received by the waste receiving station, which is Mount Forest. To date, despite the ongoing conversations between both the Continuous Improvement Fund, CMO, and municipalities that are going through the transition program, and indeed the First Nation communities going through the transition program, it's unclear at this point in time how CMO are going to track the contamination rate, especially to a municipal level. So we're not quite sure how they're going to track it. Conversations with CMO also indicate that at this point in time, there is no penalty that has been approved if a municipality or a community fails to hit the 4% contamination rate. And further, through conversation with CMO, they've indicated verbally at least that there has been no intent to change that during the transition period, and that what they would do is if they noticed a municipality was significantly off the 4% contamination rate, that they would seek to work with that municipality primarily through the promotion public education contract, which is an addendum agreement to the master service agreement, which we signed in February, to work with us, to work with our residents to improve their recycling rates. The reason I raise that point is we do not know what our contamination rate is in the township at this point in time. Having said that, based on studies done by the Continuous Improvement Fund across a number of representative municipalities, both city and rural, both those using depot collection sites and those providing curbside collection, and those providing streamed curbside collection, as opposed to those like ourselves that provide a single stream recycling collection. Recycling rates are found to be highest in the multiple stream collection services that are offered. They are found to be lowest in those areas which are not offering streamed collection services. And even in the highest levels of collection, contamination rates far exceed 4%. So nobody's hitting the 4% based on the studies that are available at this point in time. So we're fairly confident we are not hitting the 4% mark, probably hovering somewhere around the 15 to, on a worst case scenario, 25% level of contamination in our single stream collection system. So the 4% is the one area of the contract where we would have some concern, but we're confident through the conversations we've been involved in with both the Continuous Improvement Fund and CMO and other municipalities. We're not alone in that, and that's something that we can work through during the transition period. The overall intention is that by the time we get to 2026 and beyond, we are far closer to achieving the recycling rates as established by the province.
Thank you. Are there any, Deputy Mayor Pringle, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that. So Mayor Carlton, yeah, and two, CMO awarded the RFP to Waste Management anyway, right? So in the real realm of things, we shouldn't see any real change in what we do, except for that's maybe 4% piece might change.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, to Deputy Mayor Pringle, great question. So CMO in that process at this point in time of handing out contracts for multiple different types of function in delivering their province-wide commitment to absorb the Blue Box program under the producer pay model by January 1st, 2026. At this point in time, we are aware that CMO have awarded a contract for the Waste Receiving Centre, which will service our sector. I believe we are regional area 7 for this. I can't remember. Might not be 7, it might be 14. Anyway, whatever our regional area is, they have awarded the receiving centre contract, and Waste Management Services out of Mount Forest received that, obtained that, which means that during the transition period and in 2026 and beyond, to the extent of that contract, all recycling waste has to be transported to Mount Forest. It cannot be disposed of at any other site. Everything has to channel through the Mount Forest location operated by Waste Management. As we are under contract with Waste Management Services and all our waste currently goes to that waste receiving centre, we should find no impact as a result of that contract having been awarded. What we haven't had awarded in this area to date is the collection contract. So the collection contract is the second big piece in this, and that is the contract that goes to the vendor, the commercial vendor, who will provide the curbside or depot collections as required by municipalities and communities within our collection region. My understanding is that contract, that tender is actually currently out. It may even be closed pending award at this point in time. They did delay posting that tender on the basis of conversations that took place in 2020, 2021, and early part of 2022, where the participating municipalities and communities in this area indicated they were probably not going to change the way in which they offered collection services. And so CMO did not need to prioritize a waste collection contract to be able to meet the transition date. So at this point in time, I'm not aware of who will eventually be collecting the waste in the township of Georgian Bluffs, and that will be decided before we get to January 2026. As I say, I anticipate I'll be aware of that information before the end of this year.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I have one, and really it's just for clarification. What defines contamination? So
through you, Chair, Mayor Carlton, to yourself. Contamination is basically anything that enters that stream which doesn't meet the criteria of entering the stream. And so that would be, we have a lengthy list of plastics, for example, which can be recycled. There are, however, blended plastic types and non-recyclable plastic types, which for all intents and purposes may look like a plastic type that can be recycled. A good example of this is, for example, the bag, and I'm speaking from somebody who is new to bagged milk, but the bag within which your 3 bags of milk come, that bag is a recyclable plastic. The bags that your milk is contained within is not a recyclable plastic. So if you put that bag that had your milk in it into the recycling stream, that is now a piece of contamination in the stream. And so anytime a piece of material enters a stream which is considered to be contaminated. Another great example of this is wrapping paper. If you put a foil type wrapping paper into the stream, that is an element of contamination. So the 4% is by weight, how much of that material is a contaminated source. Generally speaking, contamination are where there are blended material types that are brought into a product. The other big issue on the contamination at this point in time, which again CMO has to wrestle with, is that at this point in time, recycling collection is a downloaded responsibility to municipalities at either an upper tier or a lower tier level. And again, some are upper tier, some are lower tier like ourselves. And we establish with our particular vendors what products are recyclable. And again, an example of this is in our area, we do accept black plastic, but in other areas, black plastic is a rejected material. And so it is inconsistent between different collection areas what is a acceptable material and not an acceptable material. And so what's unclear about the 4% is whether that 4% is a contamination rate against your municipality's currently collected and acceptable materials, or a 4% contamination against what CMO consider to be recyclable materials, which they haven't yet defined because that doesn't kick in until 2026. So the 4% is certainly an area where there is massive room for gap.
So let's hope CMO is going to do all the advertising to let people know what is acceptable and what is not.
So through you, Madam Chair, that is a partnership piece of work between the township and CMO that we anticipate starting very much before 2026 as we start to get ready for that transition window. Also, the benefit of this being a provincial-wide system by that point is we're anticipating that CMO will have a very high-profile public education campaign that they launch on a province-wide basis, which we will be basically piggybacking on as it comes to communicating with our township residents and communities.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
And I imagine some education wouldn't hurt along the way anyway, so that we can reduce the contaminants and better still reduce the amount of recyclable material that gets purchased and put out there anyway.
So through you, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor, Councillor Coburn, you're quite correct. The intention, at least at the provincial level, of moving to a producer pay model is that there is now a financial incentive on producers to limit the amount of waste. And so in theory, between now and 2026, in order to help mitigate and offset producers' responsibilities, we would anticipate that they would be lowering the amount of material used per packaging, and that they would also be making the packaging that they do need to use more easily recycled at the end of the day. Certainly, we've seen some of the provincial retailers moving in that direction, even eliminating things like paper bags from their waste stream over coming months. And I think we all know which vendor that is that we make a regular stop off on a week-to-week basis in that instance. But I believe that the intention behind the producer responsible model is that retailers, like some of the big supermarket chains and so on and so forth, will reduce their waste. It is interesting because at this point in time, we as a township are going through the process of determining whether or not we are actually a producer, probably are a producer. And so there will be a financial incentive for us to lower the amount of waste that we as a township generate in terms of doing our operational business and reaching out to residents and communities on a year-to-year basis.
Excellent. Thank you. So if there is no further comment on this one, we will move on to item 16.2, development and drainage impacts on Church Side Road and Bonmy Beach Road. And Councillor Coburn, I noticed this one's back over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. A couple of weeks ago now, maybe more, Mayor Carlton and I joined CAO Niall out at this section of our municipality to do a little tour with some of the concerned residents there. And their concerns are continue to be drainage and the impacts of stormwater runoff. There's a number of different issues at play, but one of them seems to also be the potential impact of the subdivision that's to go in above that, the Davenport subdivision. So I guess for me, I found that half a day to be really interesting and helpful. And I wanted to bring it back to council to consider sort of what are our next steps. This is a part of a much bigger picture, right? So it involves, as we heard tonight, the extension of the sewers from Cobble and the impact on the development there. But also, I just wonder if we all need to be brought up to speed on the drainage plans that are in place and what status those are at and what we need to know going forward. I imagine something will be coming forward for council. I just wondered if that we'll see that anytime soon.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, at this point in time, no, there wouldn't be anything coming forward. We would require a direction of council to bring something forward. The next opportunity for a review of this would be through the development of lands associated to the upper part that the residents were expressing some concern to. And that's when we would next be bringing back information on this at this point in time. However, staff are prepared to bring an update on stormwater drainage in that area if council so direct. I would anticipate that is a fairly significant undertaking to collate that information and be able to bring that back in a way which is both comprehensive, but also in a way which is, well, in a way in which I feel confident that I'd be able to speak to it. And so I would anticipate that would be perhaps late September, maybe early November by the time we were able to do that.
Do we need direction on that, or okay, so we could do a motion at this point on that? So Councillor Coburn, do you wish to make a motion to that effect?
Sure, I'll give it a whirl on the fly here and Carly will correct me as needed. But I would move that council direct staff to bring back a report regarding the drainage in the Church Side Road and Balmy Beach Road area. I don't know if we're looking for any more information than that. That's enough for now.
Is that sufficient information? Okay. Could I have a seconder on that motion? Councillor Day. Is there any question from the rest of council? Then I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, 16.3. CAO job description. This was added as a result of our meeting on Monday evening. So the recommendation that the job description and posting for the Chief Administrative Officer be approved and that staff are hereby directed to advertise for the position immediately. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn. Any discussion? Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. And through you to our HR manager, Crystal, I just wanted to say thanks to Crystal for sitting down with me and going over this document together. I think the changes that I had recommended, I think we've handled pretty well, but we're obviously open to hearing your feedback. I believe there were only two that had to do with changing content. And I thought I ought to bring those to your attention in case you missed them. So at one point it makes reference to, Crystal, you'll have to help me with the page here, but mayor and council. And I would recommend we just simply leave that at council. I suppose in municipalities or cities where there's a stronger mayor model, that would make sense, but to me, it doesn't here. So I did recommend that one change, and there is another sentence that I wondered if we could just have a little bit of discussion about. It is on page 3, just above the photograph. And it's the bullet point right above the picture. So it reads, or it read, instills confidence and promotes initiative in employees. No, that wasn't it. It's the one above that. Very sorry. Encourages department heads to make decisions within their jurisdiction with minimal CAO involvement, yet maintain general control of operations by providing the right amount of communication to the staff. I think on Councillor Day's recommendation to change the wording to the one beneath it, I would recommend we change the wording to that as well. It seems odd to me that we would put in a job posting that we're telling our CAO to have minimal involvement with department heads. It doesn't, there's something about that doesn't seem palatable to me. And in fact, there are times and situations where I would think the CAO's involvement in some of those decisions would have to be significant. So I think a blanket statement that says the CAO ought to minimize their involvement in decision-making of department heads is too restrictive. And I would like to see that changed.
Okay, any comments from the rest of council? Any ideas for how to change that wording? Councillor Day, go ahead.
I'm glad you pulled that bullet point. I actually pulled that one out as well when I pulled the second one on Monday night, but hadn't thought of a way of rewording it simply. So I'm really happy to see some further discussion here. And I had thoughts about breaking it up into 2 separate bullet points or just changing the entire sentence, which I can work on here, but I'd love to hear more discussion about this sentence from others too.
Anyone else or?
I just want to make a quick comment that these competencies come from the CAO performance plan, that these are all listed in there. So if it's removed from here, we might want to consider down the road removing it from there as well and changing the wording. So keeping that in mind, it is part of your CAO policy, performance review policy. All the competencies listed are in there. This is directly from that.
Okay, so is there a way that we can reword that? Go ahead, Councillor Coburn.
I just wonder if maybe something a little, I want to say softer, but facilitates leadership skills and decision-making amongst senior staff. Would that cover it? It doesn't mean that they're completely out of it, but they're certainly facilitating those senior staff to step up and
keeps it on a more positive note. Councillor Day, go.
The ideas that are floating around in my brain go something like seeks balance between empowering employees, perhaps senior employees, while maintaining general control of operations.
I see everybody nodding. So Crystal, would you like her to say that again?
Okay. Seeks balance between employing senior employees while maintaining general control of operations.
I'm just going to repeat back. Yeah. Seeks balance between employing senior employees while maintaining control of general operations.
Empowering employees.
One more time for you. Seeks balance between empowering senior employees while maintaining control of general operations.
Slightly different, but I think it not in a significant way, while maintaining general control of operations was the original phrase. I am second guessing myself now, and I wonder if it should be all employees, empowering all employees to whatever level their job description entails.
Instead of senior, just all.
I would agree, just employees. Any other comments?
Final read.
Okay.
Seeks balance between empowering employees while maintaining general control of operations.
Okay. Anything else in the document? So with those revisions that were presented in this document, everyone is good to go and we can post the job position as soon as possible.
It will be changes accepted and posted tomorrow.
Okay. Everyone's good with that? Okay, so I had a mover and seconder. That was discussion. I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Notice of motion. Does any member have a notice of motion they wish to bring forward at this time? I would like to bring forward a motion to open reconsideration on the Cobble Beach garbage situation and direct staff to prepare the report. And could I have a mover and I don't need a mover and seconder. We're just doing notice of motion, right?
Okay. Nothing again?
So this is just a notice of motion at this point. Go ahead.
For you, Mayor Carlton, I'm just thinking for simplicity's sake, since this notice had been provided previously, that we just quickly waive the procedure bylaw to essentially add this under new business. And then you can bring the motion forward to reconsider and to direct staff to bring forward a report at the July 19th Committee of the Whole meeting.
So it will come forward on new business at that point?
It will come forward under staff reports on the July 19th committee agenda.
So we don't need to do anything further at this point?
So at this point, I will need you to waive the procedure bylaw so that a motion to reconsider and provide direction to staff will be put on the floor.
Okay, so Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Is that, so we're waiving the procedure bylaw because we're now making a motion on an item that wasn't part of our agenda. And I'm just wondering that that's not an issue in terms of transparency to the public, and we've discussed it before, so it's okay. All right.
So we need a motion to waive the procedural bylaw to allow this to happen. Okay, I have a mover. We'll go Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Closed session, none.
Just to clarify, we've now waived the procedure bylaw, but was there a motion to reconsider the garbage collection at Cobble Beach? I believe, and I do apologize because I should have included this under new business, given that it had been brought up previously, so that was my error. I'm recommending that we have a motion for that reconsideration and an additional line in that motion to direct staff to bring forward a staff report at the July 19th Committee of the Whole meeting.
Okay. Do you need us to state that motion, or do you have something crafted that we can follow? We have the motion, know what it is? And I need a mover and a seconder in that then. I have a mover and seconder, please.
I'm confused.
Now to make two of us right now, so,
Sorry, I thought this was already, the notice of motion the last time was to bring that back to staff then, right? Right, seems like.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So it was brought up under notice of motion, but a vote had not been taken at that time. It should have been included on this agenda under new business, but unfortunately I missed that. I do apologize. So hence the waiving of the procedure bylaw to add it under new business. And now you actually need to put a motion on the floor to reconsider that decision. And if you would like staff to bring back further information to accompany that reconsideration, you will need to take the vote on that.
so we need a mover and a seconder, so we get this where it should have been on new business. And we get it to move forward without having missed any steps in the procedure.
Yes.
Okay, are we clear now? Okay, good. So Deputy Mayor Pringle is moving it. Councillor Coburn is seconding. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. That we're going to get a report about Cromwell garbage coming back. We know what we voted on. Okay, so no closed session. Confirming bylaw. Recommendation that bylaw number 2023. I'll stop.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, just to slightly further complete this one, there was correspondence received in relation to this.
Yes.
Did you defer a discussion on that to this point in the agenda, or did council receive that for information with no action?
We received that for information, I guess, with no action.
Okay, I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, we didn't defer it. We received it for information. Okay. We're all clear? Okay. Confirming bylaw. That bylaw number 2023-045 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on July 12, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day? Councillor Coburn? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Date of our next regular meeting is July 19th at 5 p.m. If there's no further business, I will now call for adjournment of this meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Winters. If there's no discussion, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We are now adjourned.